Welcome back to the Compressor Guru. Today we're going to go over, this is actually the part B or second part of the 5120 Salvage compressor video. We tore the valves out of it, me and Preston the other day, and actually Preston tore the valves out of it under my tutelage. And yesterday I took and I cleaned up all the valves. I inspected several valves that ended up going into the scrap pile also, but we have some valves that are ready for sale. We're going to put them up on eBay here in a little while, but they're going to be here, and if somebody calls in, we'll sell them to them. These valves were in a 5120 compressor that ran 3 weeks, and then the sawmill burned. The reason we're sitting here with our parts laid out here on the table is I was talking to a customer / friend biker, John in Waukegan, Illinois, and John asked about the discharge valve. This is a discharge valve, and this is the modern version of what they put in the QR series 10 horsepower compressors and up from Quincy Compressor. This is a discharge or exhaust valve, and it actually comes apart very easily. You just put a screwdriver in here and twist. These are the new style valves. I don't care for them. I'll put a link in the description. We were at Roarbaugh Lumber working on one of these, and we had one of these valves in the discharge, and it had been in there for a while, and it was not pumping. It was bad. It was ready to come out. We took the valve cover off, we took this out, and this was stuck in the head. With the old style valves, they don't come apart inside of the head. You get a hold of this with a pair of pliers and yank the whole thing out. So when I was talking to John in Illinois, he bought a bunch of parts for a 350, which these are the valves that would go in a 350 Quincy. Newer, anything from like change of record 17 or 20 up. And here's how easy they come apart. Let's hope this one pops apart easy. There it is. Now, this is a used valve, and I'm putting it in here to show you how easy that comes apart. And you can imagine if this is all down in the head, that you saw more it took to get that off. If this comes out and this is stuck in the head, the problem that can be. When you order aftermarket valves from us, here is a new one. That's one that was 3 weeks old. Yeah, that's how clean they are. When you order a new one, we sell you the old kind. There is nothing better about this valve than this valve, except actually the old style is better because they don't fall apart in the head. You'll see if you look at that Roarbaugh video where I'm hammering inside the head, getting this piece broke loose, penetrating oil and a drift and a punch and trying to get it to move. And finally we did get it out. Our alternative was to pull the head and hammer it out from the underside, which on that particular machine was a lot of work. So when you buy aftermarket Quincy valves from us, part number 6670X1, this is what you get. These valves work exactly the same, but when John asked me about, well, that exhaust valve just snaps together. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. And I have a disassembled one here to show you how easy they are to put together with the parts. I wanted to give you some part numbers in case you called in and said, Bud, I want one of those exhaust valves. You have the part number, and before I move on to the other valves, I'm going to show you how easy these are to snap together. We have our disassembled one. It's been cleaned up. This one will stay disassembled because this one is discolored from the heat from that compressor, and we will not sell it. This will go in the scrap pile. But in the meantime, here's your valve spring. It is a 6909. It goes in the top part of the valve. You take your 2036 valve disc, you put it on there, you squeeze it together, and this bolt shifts. See, that bolt comes all the way out. I'm just going to leave it out for a second. And you take and you get things. I got to hold my tongue just right to do that. You get things all lined up, put your bolt in, and you spin it down. And I need a wrench to finish it, but you spin it down and tighten it up. It's that easy. So if that were tight, it would be like that. Then you test it. You test it by putting a little bit of fuel in these journals. If the fuel stays in those journals and doesn't leak down past, the rebuild is good. When you're doing that, check and move the valve spring, move the valve disc up and down, and refill it. And if it holds the fuel, you're good. And that's the simple way to test this. If it holds fuel for 30 seconds and doesn't drop down, this is good enough to go back in the machine and make air. That being said, if it does leak down, you may want to make sure that you have no dirt or carbon. A speck of dust, a hard speck of dust, will keep this from testing well. So you make sure you're good and clean when you go together. Now, the other discharge valve, and I'm not even going to put that together because it's not for sale. That was glued in the fire. The other discharge valve is a little more difficult to put together, and this is for sale. It's customers, but this is a valve that we rebuilt after we pulled the old valves, and we were rebuilding him valves for spares, and this will be for sale also. And it's as simple to put together as that. I got everything lined up. The valve disc is moving freely. You put it on a anvil, you take a hammer and just pop it right there in the center, and it'll be stuck together just like it was before. We thought show and tell is better than tell. So this is that same valve. It still will come apart if I let go of it. And I have everything lined up. There it is. And that's how the factory puts them together. Now, I understand that the factory, Quincy, saved some money because they didn't have to bore this hole for that bolt. They didn't have the price of that bolt. They didn't have to tap that bolt. But this is an inferior valve to the old style. So this is for sale. This is a used rebuilt valve. And those are the other used rebuilt valves over there. And they are for sale also for the same customer. These three are used rebuilts. These ones over here and these two out here were through the fire, but we tore them apart, cleaned them up. We did replace a valve spring or a valve disc that had been blued, but the valve body was not blued up. This one, for example, this is your suction valve. We'll get to the part numbers on in. But you can see it's got some bluing from temperature up here. But when I tore this one apart, the discoloration stops right about where my fingernail is. And we took and we tore this apart, and inside of this was still silver. So even though it may have lost some of its temper on the top side of this valve, there's no wear parts on the top side of this valve. This valve disc and spring bump to the lower side, and there's no discoloration from heat down here, so I trust this valve also. We will be selling these valves for half price of list, and you pay the shipping. Let me set this back off the side. Enough about the discharge valves. We now have my opinion that we don't like the new style. We will sell you the old style discharge valves.
If they wanted the new style, would you sell them the new style?
I'll sell them the new style, and it will have to come OEM because my aftermarket supplier sells the old style, and I appreciate that. Quincy has made changes over the year, and all their changes have had to do with saving $1 on machining. Let's move on to our suction valve or our intake valve. Here is a valve that went through the fire, virtually no discoloration on it, same disc, same spring inside, and you may go, oh, for all the more the disc and the spring are, why didn't you change them? Well, these discs have 3 weeks of wear time against this bumper. The bumper is the valve seat itself, part of the cast iron. And they have had 3 weeks of 8 hours a day running and wearing in and not wearing out, just wearing in to where they are seating perfectly against this valve seat. It's now matched. Instead of throwing new parts in here that may not match perfect till they run for 3 weeks, you're actually getting a better valve because you got a little bit of run time on it and they're broke in. So this is a suction valve. It has the same valve disc and valve spring, except the disc on this one goes here and the spring goes on top of it. With the discharge valve, the disc and spring actually go like that. So with the suction valve or the intake valve, the disc and spring go in here, and it's the same disc and spring that go in your other ones. I was starting to complain about Quincy saving money on manufacturing. This is a new suction valve, and I was working on getting a part number for it because the part number for this and this are different. This one cannot be used as an unloader intake valve. This one can. You take 3 springs and 3 pins, you drop them down that hole, and you put them in there, and when you move that pin down, it disables this valve, and it unloads and lets the compressor go to an idle. Quincy, trying to save money, didn't bore these holes, and so this one can only be used as a suction valve, and if your machine has an unloader assembly, this valve can't be used. Make sure I put my parts back in the right place. It didn't want to stay. So we have a number of the intake valves, a number of the discharge valves, and we have a few more valves that we brought back to the shop after we did the valve job and rebuilt with new springs and valve disc. And these are all for sale. They're all from the same customer, and we're going to help him. I don't know if anybody of you have ever lost everything in a business due to a fire, but there's nothing left up there but a cement pad where the sawmill was. when you buy this suction valve, we include a new copper gasket. You can reuse these gaskets. I don't recommend it. If it's an emergency and you don't have a gasket, you can reuse them, but if you buy this valve, we will include a new copper gasket. We do not include the unloader pins and springs. If you request them, we do have them here. We'll add them to the order. You'd think my table wasn't level. We'll add them to the order. And you may go, well, what about the gasket for the top? Well, that's an issue. Like I said earlier, this valve is the same valve that we use in the QR series in single stage and two stage from 10 horsepower clear up to 30 horsepower. This is the same valve. This is the same valve. So you might put this in a 5120 and the 350 might take the same gasket if it's a double. It might take the same gasket if it's a single, but I can't guarantee when you buy the valve if you're going to be using a double or a single gasket. I don't have one out here to show you. But the copper gasket, the 2024, will be part of the valve when you order it. Folks, thanks John for the question about what do you mean they bolt together, or when he thought he must have the new style discharge valve, because he said don't they snap together? Well, they do. And I just thought we'd do some clarification, kind of a follow-up on the Salvage, and these are the good valves and the rebuilt valves for this customer. Somebody's going to get a deal on them, even though they're used, or I shouldn't say call them used, but we have used rebuilt valves and we have new valves with 3 weeks of time on. I trust every one of these valves. I've tested them, I've cleaned them, I've tested them, and these valves work perfect. So if you need discharge, suction, exhaust, intake, whatever your terminology you want to use on them, you now have the part numbers of the valves. This will be included with, one of these will be included with each valves. And you now know what goes on the inside, and if you're ordering them that they go under an unloader tower, you may want to order new pins and springs. I don't want to call this a sales video. It is in a way, but the truth of the matter is, we worry that our customers and our friends know exactly how to work on this stuff, because that's the purpose of this channel. I can only run around Western Pennsylvania and work on machines, but we've got customers all over the country now, and we are doing our best to educate them so they can work on their own machines. I want to thank you. Let me ask you, camera wife, did I cover everything?
Well, I think you probably covered most everything, but I've been admiring these compressors behind you, speaking of good deals.
Well, let me tell you, this compressor is $21.50, and that identical compressor, one serial number off, I have new pricing on, sorry, and that compressor is now $22.95. They are good machines. These are American made. These are 80-gallon, single phase, 220, 5-horse compressors. They're 80-gallon tanks. They make 17.5 CFM at 150 PSI, maybe 175 PSI. This is a great compressor and would run easily a two-man body shop. One of the rules of thumb I use when I'm going out and playing salesman is when you have somebody in a body shop, not counting secretaries and adjusters, but when you have somebody in a body shop, and let's say they got 5 techs working on cars, to really make sure you have enough air, you should have 2 horsepower per man in that body shop. So if you have 5 techs, you should have at least 10 horsepower worth of air. And you can do that with a single 10. You can do it with 2 5s. There's lots of ways to get to 10 horsepower. But anyway, this will easily run a 2-man body shop. It will run a small tire shop. It's great for a mechanic shop. And first guy in the door gets this one for $24.50. Second guy in the door gets that one for $22.95. I'm sorry we had to raise prices. Let me give you a sales pitch on Atlas Copco. Atlas Copco bought Quincy Compressors. And these here are for the QR series. This is a QT series. One of the main differences with the QT series is it's a splash loop machine. These are built to compete with Ingersoll, and they compete very, very well. We're right at the same price mark for where Ingersoll is. And as far as quality, I actually like these a little bit better. The QT series has been on the market for probably 20 or more years now. And the other part is the big difference between this and the QR series is this has a valve plate. If you have to do a valve job, you don't have 4 or 6 valves in the head that you have to pull out and rebuild one at a time. You take the head off. And when I say head, I mean the top part. You take 6 bolts out, you scrape the gaskets, you put a new valve plate on, you put it together, torque it up, and your valve job is done. I can do a valve job on a QT series in a third of the time it would take you to do a valve job on the QR series. Maybe even faster.
Thank you for watching this episode of The Compressor Guru. Please hit like and subscribe and use the notify bell so you will know when the next new episode is released from The Compressor Guru. God bless you and have a great day.